I financially supported my entire family for 10 years. When I got a cancer diagnosis, not one of them came to a single appointment. A decade of mortgage payments, emergency loans, and dropped everything. Then I needed them once and found out exactly what all of it was worth. My name is Nathan Cole. I'm 38 years old. For 10 years, I was the person my family called when things went wrong. Not the person they called to share good news or to celebrate or to just check in on a random Tuesday. The person they called when the mortgage was behind, when the credit card was maxed, when the car payment couldn't be made, when the job fell through, when the landlord sent a notice. I was the financial emergency contact for my entire family. I paid my parents' mortgage for 3 years straight. I cleared my sister's credit card debt twice. I co-signed my brother's car loan and then quietly covered 6 months of his payments when he lost his job. I wired $3,500 to my cousin Jerome for a situation he described as urgent and serious, and which he has never repaid or mentioned again. I flew home for every family emergency, every single one, 4 hours on a plane or 6 hours on the road, depending on what flights were available, and I always came. When I was 36 years old, I was diagnosed with cancer. Stage 2 Hodgkin's lymphoma. Serious enough to require aggressive treatment. Not a death sentence. My oncologist was genuinely encouraging about the prognosis. But 18 months of chemotherapy and management and the particular grinding exhaustion of being sick while the rest of your life continues to exist. What I needed was not money. I had savings. I had insurance. What I needed was presence. Someone to drive me to appointments. Someone to sit in a waiting room so I didn't sit alone. Someone to check in without being asked. Someone to show up the way I had always shown up for them. My parents said Houston was too far, for hours each way. My sister said she had the kids and couldn't leave. My brother said work was too busy right now. My cousin Jerome never responded at all. My girlfriend Simone was at every single appointment. My friend and coworker Andre drove me to chemotherapy 6 times. My family sent a group text saying they were praying for me and asked if I needed anything. When I said yes, when I actually named specific things I needed, nobody followed up. 18 months later, I was in remission. At the first family gathering afterward, my mother looked at me across the table and said, with genuine warmth, "We always knew you'd get through it. You're the strong one." I looked around the table. I thought about 10 years of checks and cosigns and emergency flights. I thought about 6 months of sitting in a chemo chair with the 2 people who were not my family. I thought about what strong one actually meant in this family, what it had always meant. It meant the one we take from. I didn't make a scene. I didn't say any of this out loud at the dinner table. I just quietly, over the months that followed, stopped being available. And when my brother called needing a cosign on a new apartment lease, I said no for the first time in my adult life. The silence after that no was the loudest thing I have ever heard. This is the story of what happens when the strong one finally stops performing strength for people who never plan to return it. I grew up in a small city in East Texas, the oldest of 3 children. My parents, Walter and Gloria Cole, worked hard. My father ran a small construction business. My mother worked as a school administrator. We were not wealthy, but we were stable, at least when I was young. There was food on the table. The house was paid for, mostly. We had what we needed. I am 5 years older than my brother Damon and 8 years older than my sister Renee. The age gap between me and my siblings shaped a lot of things. By the time they were in high school, I was already out of the house, already working, already becoming the version of myself that the rest of the family would eventually learn to rely on. I went to college on a partial academic scholarship, worked 2 part-time jobs to cover the rest, studied accounting, graduated with honors and no debt, which I considered the primary achievement of my young life. I got a job in Houston at a mid-sized financial services firm, got promoted steadily. By my late 20s, I was earning a salary that, relative to my family's circumstances, felt large. It was not large by Houston standards, but it was large by the standards of a family in East Texas where my father's construction business had started struggling. The first request came when I was 28. My father called on a Wednesday evening, which was unusual. He was not a phone call person. He communicated in person or not at all, mostly. "Business has hit a rough patch," he said. "We're behind on the mortgage by 2 months. Your mother and I don't want to lose the house." "How much are you behind?" He told me. "And the monthly payment going forward?" He told me that too. I thought for a moment. "I'll cover it," I said. "Going forward until things stabilize. Send me the account information." "Nathan." "I mean it, Dad. Send me the information." He was quiet for a moment. "I'll pay you back. Just send the information." I covered that mortgage for 3 years. My father's business never fully recovered. The construction market in East Texas had shifted in ways he didn't have the capital to adapt to, but my parents kept their house. My mother still lives in that house today. My father passed 2 years ago, still grateful in his quiet way for those 3 years, though he never quite managed to say so directly. I want to be clear about something. I don't regret covering that mortgage. My parents gave me what they could when I was coming up. They worked hard. They stayed. They went to every school event, showed up for every game, maintained a household that felt stable even when money was tighter than they let on. The house was the thing they had built their life around and poured 30 years into. Letting them lose it when I had the means to prevent it was simply not something I was willing to do. For the 3 years I covered that mortgage, I never told a single person outside the family. Not my coworkers, not my friends in Houston. Felt private. It felt like the kind of thing you do for the people you love without needing anyone to know you did it. I mention that only because I think it explains something about how the pattern developed. I was not helping from a place of wanting recognition. I was helping from a place of genuine love and a genuine belief that this is what family means. You have more, they need more, you bridge the gap. That is not a complicated equation. The complication came later. The complication came when the equation stopped being an occasional exception and became the permanent operating assumption. When I became not just someone who helped in a crisis but the designated crisis solution for an entire extended family. When every hard situation in everyone else's life had, at the end of its chain of consequences, Nathan Cole as the backstop. What I am describing is not resentment toward my parents for needing help. I am describing what happened when that help became an expectation rather than a gift. When it spread from my parents to my siblings to my extended family. When the role of family emergency fund became so thoroughly assigned to me that no one in my family ever paused to consider that I might have needs of my own that required the same quality of showing up. That I might someday sit in a chair with an 4 in my arm and need someone to simply be in the room. My sister Renee has what I would gently describe as a complicated relationship with money. She earns a decent income as a dental hygienist. She also spends at a rate that consistently outpaces what she earns. Not on anything dramatic, no addiction, no crisis, just a steady accumulation of lifestyle choices that don't quite fit the budget. The first time I paid off her credit card balance, I told myself it was a one-time thing, a reset. A chance for her to start fresh and manage things differently. I cleared $14,000 of her credit card debt when she was 27. By the time she was 31, the balance was back. Not exactly the same amount, somewhat more because life had happened and the card had been convenient. She called me the way she always called, upbeat and slightly apologetic and absolutely certain I would help. I did help. I cleared it again. I am not unaware of the pattern I was enabling. I understood, even at the time, that bailing someone out of a financial situation they keep recreating is not entirely a kindness. But Renee is my sister. She has 2 kids by that point, both under 5. The debt was hanging over her in a way that was affecting everything. I had the money, so I paid it. The second time I said, clearly and directly, "This is the last time, Renee. I need you to understand that." She said she understood. She thanked me. She said she was going to be more careful. She has not asked me again since. That part is to her credit. What she has not done is show up for me. But I am getting to that. Damon, my brother, is 5 years younger and has spent most of his adult life in a cycle of almost stable, almost getting ahead, always a disruption away from needing help. The car loan situation was the most significant. Damon needed a vehicle for a new job, a real job, a logistics coordinator position that paid decently and had genuine potential. He couldn't qualify for the loan alone because his credit history had gaps. He asked me to co-sign. Co-signing a loan is a bigger ask than lending money. When you co-sign, you are not just vouching for someone. You are accepting that if they don't pay, you pay. Your credit, your financial standing, your liability. I knew all of that. I co-signed anyway, because the job was real and the need was real, and Damon is my brother. The job lasted 14 months before the company downsized his position. Damon was out of work for 6 months. During those 6 months, the car payment did not get made. I found out about it when the loan servicer called me, the co-signer, to ask about the delinquent account. Covered it. 6 months of payments. I did not tell Damon I was doing it. I just handled it because the alternative was damage to my own credit that I wasn't willing to accept. Damon found out eventually. He thanked me, said he would pay me back. He has not paid me back. These are the people I am talking about when I talk about my family. Not monsters, not cruel people. People who loved me in their way and took from me consistently and had, over the course of a decade, quietly arranged their understanding of our relationship around the assumption that I would always be there, always have something to give, and never need anything in return. That assumption was never examined out loud. It was never a conversation anyone had. It was just the water we all swam in, and I let it be, because challenging it felt like choosing my own comfort over my family's needs, and I had always believed that was a trade I was willing to make. I found out I had cancer on a Thursday morning in March. The diagnosis came after a period of symptoms I had been dismissing for months. Fatigue that I attributed to overwork and the standard grind of a demanding job. Night sweats that soaked through my sheets 2 or 3 times a week, which I told myself was stress. A lymph node on the left side of my neck that had swollen into something I could feel clearly when I pressed my fingers there, which I had been pressing and releasing and telling myself was probably an infection that would resolve on its own. I went to my primary care doctor finally, after 3 months of this, when the lymph node showed no signs of resolving. She sent me for imaging. The imaging sent me to a specialist. The specialist ordered a biopsy. The biopsy took a week to come back. Stage 2 Hodgkin's lymphoma. The oncologist, Dr. Reyes, was measured and thorough and clearly experienced with the conversation she was having with me. She was direct in the way I needed her to be. She told me the prognosis for this type and stage was genuinely good with treatment. Hodgkin's responds well, the survival rates are high, we have effective tools. She told me what treatment would look like. She answered every question I asked, and I asked a lot of questions because sitting quietly with uncertainty has never been something I do well. I drove home from that appointment alone. It was a Thursday afternoon in Houston and the traffic was terrible, and I sat in it for 40 minutes barely registering what was happening around me. I pulled into my apartment parking lot, turned off the engine, and sat in the car for a while longer. I was 36 years old. I had never been seriously ill. I had, to that point, organized my entire adult life around being the capable one. The one who handled things. The one who did not require handling. I sat in the parking lot and thought about that for a while. About the particular irony of being the family strong man at the exact moment the strength had to go entirely toward yourself. Then I went inside and called Simone. Simone is my girlfriend. We had been together for about 2 years at that point. She had grown up in Houston, worked as a physical therapist, had a matter-of-fact approach to hard situations that I had always appreciated. When I called her, she said, "I'm coming over." And she did. And she sat across from me and let me process it out loud for 3 hours without trying to fix anything or make it easier than it was. That was the first piece of evidence. I logged it without fully understanding what I was logging. The next day I called my parents. My father answered. I told him what the diagnosis was and what the doctor had said about treatment. He was quiet for a long time. "Son," he said finally. That was all. Just son. But I could hear everything in it. The fear, the helplessness, the love that my father expressed almost exclusively through silence when words weren't available to him. I talked to my mother next. She cried. She said she and Dad would figure out how to get to Houston. She said she wanted to be there. "The first treatment is in 3 weeks," I told her. "It'll be about 4 hours. You don't have to." "We want to be there," she said firmly. I held on to that. I believed it. 3 weeks later, the day before my first chemo session, my mother called. "Nathan, honey, your father's back has been acting up something terrible. He can't sit in a car for 4 hours each way right now. The doctor told him no long trips." "Okay," I said. "I can't leave him alone the way he is. You understand." "I understand. You know we'd be there if we could." "I know, Mom." "You'll call us right after? Tell us how it went." "I'll call." I hung up. I sat with that for a moment. Then I called Simone, who already knew about the appointment, who was already planning to come. I did not call Damon or Renee yet. I had told them about the diagnosis in a family group text. The response had been warm and alarmed and full of the kinds of phrases that read as supportive but don't require any actual action. "Praying for you. So sorry you're going through this. Let us know if you need anything." A week after the diagnosis, I tested the "let us know if you need anything." I sent Damon a direct message. Told him I had my first treatment coming up and that it would help to have someone there with me. Asked if he could come down to Houston for a couple of days. He replied 8 hours later. Said he was in the middle of a big project at work and couldn't really take time off right now. Said he was thinking about me. Said we'd talk soon. I sent Renee a similar message. She replied the same day, which I appreciated. She said she had the kids and couldn't arrange childcare for 2 full days on short notice. She asked if Simone would be there. I said yes. She said good, that made her feel better. It made her feel better. I sat with that phrase for a while. I called my cousin Jerome mostly out of thoroughness, not real expectation. He didn't answer. He texted back, "Damn man. Hang in there, bro." That was the last I heard from Jerome for the duration of my treatment. So it was Simone. Simone and, beginning with the second treatment, my coworker Andre, who found out through a mutual colleague, called me directly and said without any ceremony, "Tell me when your next appointment is. I'm driving you." Andre is not a close friend in the way the word is usually meant. We are work friends who have genuine respect for each other, who have had real conversations over the years, who would not have called ourselves each other's people before any of this. He just showed up, decided the situation called for it, and showed up. He drove me to 6 chemotherapy sessions over the course of the treatment period. He sat in the waiting area and read. He brought coffee. He did not make it into a big thing. He just came. I have thought about Andre a lot since then, about what his showing up means in the context of everything else. Andre is not my family. He has no history with me that goes back further than the job. No shared childhood, no obligation rooted in blood or decades of relationship. He is simply a man who found out a colleague was going through something serious, assessed the situation, and decided to be useful. He never explained himself, never made a speech about it, never referenced it afterward in a way that suggested he expected something in return. He just came, consistently, and drove me home when it was done, and said see you next time as if it were nothing. I think about what it means to be the person who decides, without any particular obligation, that someone needs company and that you are going to provide it. About how that decision, unremarkable from the outside, just a man in a waiting room with a coffee, lands on the person receiving it like something genuinely large, like proof of something you had started to doubt. Like evidence that people are capable of showing up even when they don't have to. Andre restored something in me during those treatment months. Not my faith in my family exactly, but my faith in the possibility of being seen and shown up for. My faith that the way I had always operated, the showing up, the being present, the treating other people's hard moments as things worth showing up for, was a real and replicable thing, not just a personality quirk I had that nobody else shared. It just turned out the person who shared it with me wasn't someone I was related to. And that told me something important about where I had been directing my best energy for a decade. The treatment lasted 18 months. Not every session was brutal. Hodgkin's is among the more treatable lymphomas, and Dr. Reyes had been right to be cautiously optimistic. But there were stretches that were genuinely hard. Weeks where the fatigue was total, where getting out of bed required a calculation and getting to the kitchen felt like an accomplishment. Weeks where the nausea was constant and food was something other people did. Weeks where I sat in my apartment in the particular silence of being sick and thought about all the years I had answered every call, every request, every emergency, and how completely alone this particular emergency felt. I want to describe some of those treatment days clearly, because I think the details matter. Chemo sessions ran 4 to 5 hours at the infusion center. You sit in a reclining chair in a room with other patients, for line in your arm, watching something on a tablet or staring out a window or sometimes just being still because being still is all the energy you have. The nurses are professional and kind. The other patients, the ones you see consistently because you're all on similar schedules, develop a kind of unspoken solidarity. I knew a woman named Patricia who was in the chair next to mine for 4 sessions in a row. We didn't talk much, but there was something in the shared presence that helped. Simone came when she could, which was most times. She sat beside me and worked on her laptop or read or just kept me company without making it heavy. She learned quickly what I needed, when to talk and when to be quiet, when to get up and get me something and when to just stay in the chair. She learned me during those months in a way I don't think would have happened any other way. Andre sat in the waiting area. Every time he came, he brought 2 coffees. One for me to have after the session when I could manage something warm. One for himself. He would read on his phone and not make a production of being there. Just present, available, unhurried. Those 2 people were my world during treatment. Them and my doctors and nurses and the occasional call from my mother on Sunday nights. My family sent periodic texts, occasional calls from Renee, checking in. One FaceTime from Damon in month 3 where he looked uncomfortable and asked how I was doing and seemed relieved when I said manageable. My mother, the Sunday calls, the prayers on the phone, the warmth that was absolutely real even from 4 hours away. None of them came to Houston. I want to say that plainly without drama, because the plainness of it is the point. I had driven 6 hours round trip to East Texas for a graduation party. I had flown home for Renee's divorce proceedings when she needed moral support. I had rearranged my work schedule and taken personal days to show up for things that mattered to people I loved. Consistently, without complaint, without keeping a ledger. When I had the thing that was the most serious, the most frightening, the most physically and emotionally demanding event of my adult life, when I was the one in the chair, the one counting down treatment sessions, the one waiting on scan results, the person who had always come could not get anyone to come. The gap between those 2 things is what this story is about. Remission came in September, about 19 months after the diagnosis. Dr. Reyes called me with the results herself, which I appreciated and noted. She said the scans were clear. No evidence of active disease. She said we would continue monitoring on a schedule going forward every 6 months for the first 2 years, annually after that, but that this was the outcome we had been working toward and that she was very pleased. I thanked her. I set down the phone. I sat in my apartment for a while. The same apartment where I had received the diagnosis call. The same couch, the same window looking out at the Houston skyline doing what it always does in the afternoon, indifferent and enormous and carrying on. I cried for about 20 minutes, not from sadness. From the release of something I had been holding with both hands for 2 years, the sustained low-level tension of not knowing, of counting sessions, of waiting on results, of doing the mental arithmetic every few weeks between the version where this ends well and the other version. The tension left all at once, or most of it did, and what was left when it went was something simpler and cleaner than I expected. Just gratitude. Plain and quiet and enormous. Then I called Simone. Then I called Andre. Then I called my mother. My mother's response to the news was its own kind of medicine. She cried. She thanked God out loud, directly, without embarrassment. She said she loved me and she was so proud of me and she had never stopped praying and she was going to keep praying because you do not stop praying when good news comes, you keep going as an act of gratitude. I listened to her pray over the phone and I did not find it uncomfortable the way I sometimes have. I found it the most honest thing she had said to me in a long time. Her love was in it. Whatever the distance, whatever the empty chairs, the love was always real. I knew that. I held on to that. What I also held on to was what the empty chairs had shown me. Not as a wound exactly, more as information. Important, necessary information about the actual shape of my relationships that I had been too busy showing up to gather before. My mother was overjoyed. She cried. She thanked God audibly. She said she had to tell my father immediately. She told me she loved me. All of that was real. 3 months later, at Thanksgiving, I drove to East Texas for the first family gathering since before the diagnosis. My father's health had declined somewhat. Renee's kids were loud and energetic and everywhere. Damon had a new girlfriend he brought without telling anyone in advance. The house smelled like my mother's, cooking in a way that traveled directly to somewhere deep in my chest. It was a good day, mostly. Felt like family. And then, near the end of the evening, my mother touched my arm and looked at me with that particular expression she carries when she is feeling something she considers important. Pride and relief and love all in the same look. "We always knew you'd get through it," she said. "You're the strong one. The strong one." I looked around the table. My father, fragile now but still here. Renee, laughing about something with her kids. Damon and his new girlfriend, comfortable and easy. My mother, beaming. All of them safe and fed and housed and present in part because I had been the strong one for a decade. All of them absent when being strong hadn't been possible for me and I had needed someone else to carry something for a while. I didn't say any of this. I smiled at my mother and said thank you and meant the love underneath her words even when the words themselves landed wrong. But something shifted at that table. Not dramatically, quietly, the way a very slow tide turns. I drove back to Houston the next morning with the windows down despite the November chill, because I needed air and the sensation of moving through it. I sat with what had changed. What had changed was not my love for the people at that table. The love was the same. What had changed was my relationship to the role I had been playing within that love. Here is what I understood with a clarity that had not been available to me before. My role in this family had been shaped almost entirely around what I could provide. I was loved, genuinely, but loved in the particular way you love something load-bearing. The way you love the foundation of a house, with gratitude when it holds, with crisis when it falters, but without ever thinking much about the foundation's own condition, without ever wondering whether the foundation was tired. The people at that table had organized their understanding of me around my availability and my capability and my consistent willingness to show up for them. They had done this without malice. They had done it the way families do, gradually, through accumulated precedent, through the slow calcification of a dynamic that started with one reasonable moment and became, over a decade, an unexamined given. And they had never had to test what happened when I couldn't show up for them, until the cancer. And when they tested it, the answer they gave was, "We find reasons not to come." I do not think they sat down and made that choice consciously. I do not think any of them said to themselves, "Nathan has always been there for me and now he needs me and I am going to choose not to be there." I think each of them looked at the situation through the lens of their own lives and their own complications and their own discomfort with illness and distance and inconvenience, and they found the reasons already waiting there to be found. But that is also a choice. Reasons are always available to the person looking for them. The people who show up do so by deciding that showing up matters more than the reasons not to. Simone made that decision. Andre made that decision. My family found the reasons. I spent 10 years showing up when it cost me something. Flights I paid for out of pocket. Paychecks I redirected. Opportunities one quietly declined because someone needed me reachable. And I had done all of it because I loved my family. That was true and remains true. But love does not mean unconditional availability with no expectation of reciprocity. Being someone's family does not mean being their resource without any obligation running the other direction. I had never asked for reciprocity. I had never sat down with any of them and laid it out. Here is a decade of what I have given. Here is what I would like in return. I had just kept giving and they had kept receiving, and we had all quietly agreed, without anyone saying a word about it, that this was simply how things were. I decided it was no longer how things were going to be. Not with anger, not with a plan for retribution, just with the simple, overdue decision that the arrangement was finished and something different was going to take its place. I did not announce this. I did not send a group text. I did not have a confrontation at Christmas or write a letter or call anyone and explain myself. I just quietly changed my behavior and watched what happened. I stopped initiating, stopped being the one who called to check in, who reached out to see how everyone was doing, who kept the family threads alive with his own energy. I waited to see whether, in my absence, anyone would reach toward me. Some did. My mother called on Sundays, same as always. That did not change. My father, in his last months before he passed, called occasionally in a new way. Shorter calls, more direct, less transactional. I think the illness had shifted something in him too. Those calls mattered to me. Renee texted sometimes. Friendly, warm texts about the kids, about things that were happening. Not deep, but present. Damon went quiet. Damon has a tendency to be in contact when he needs something and absent when he doesn't, and without me initiating, I didn't hear from him for weeks at a time. That told me what I needed to know. The request came 6 months after Thanksgiving. Damon called on a Sunday night, cheerful and easy in his way. "Hey man, so I'm finally moving out of this apartment situation. Found a good place. Better neighborhood, better price. The landlord needs a cosigner because I just started the new job and my credit score is still climbing." He kept talking, gave me details about the apartment, talked about the new job and how it was going. All of it genuine and positive. And then he got to it. "I was wondering if you'd be willing to co-sign the lease, just as a formality. I'm in a much better place financially than I was." I let a beat pass. "No," I said. Damon stopped talking. "I can't do that," I said. "Not right now." "What? I mean, is something wrong? Like financially, are you?" "I'm fine financially. I just can't co-sign right now." "Nathan," his voice had shifted, confused, a little hurt. "I don't understand. You've always—" "I know. Did I do something?" There was a version of this conversation where I explained it all, where I laid out 10 years and a cancer diagnosis and 18 months of empty chairs and a group text that said praying for you, where I made him understand what the no was made of. I didn't have that conversation, not because I was afraid of it, because I didn't think it would get me what I actually needed from my brother, which was not a defense or an apology or an explanation. What I needed from my brother was for him to experience, once, what it felt like when I was unavailable. "I'm not in a place to co-sign anything right now," I said. "I'm sorry I can't help with this one." We stayed on the phone for a few more minutes. He was subdued. We said goodbye. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment in the quiet. The quiet felt different than it used to. It used to feel like waiting for the next call, the next request, the next emergency requiring my presence. Now it felt like something I had chosen, a space I had made for myself by finally saying the word I had never said. No. 1 syllable, 11 years overdue. I have a lot of feelings about my family that I am still working through. The love is real and it is not going anywhere. My father is gone now, and the grief of that is its own separate country that I am still learning to navigate. My mother is aging and I am present for her in ways that matter. I drove to East Texas twice in the last year just to spend time with her, not because she asked, but because I wanted to. That is different. That is chosen freely, without a decade of unexamined expectation underneath it. Renee and I have actually gotten closer in a quiet way. She has asked about my health more than I expected. She brought her kids to Houston one weekend, which she had never done before. We had a good visit. She thanked me at one point for the credit card help, not the second time but the first time years earlier. Said it had meant more than she had ever said. I don't know what prompted it, but it landed. Damon found a different cosigner, got his apartment. He and I are civil when we talk, which is not often. I don't know what the future of that relationship looks like. I am not optimistic, but I am not closed off either. I am just no longer going to arrange my behavior around maintaining a version of it that only works in one direction. Simone and I are still together. More than together, we got engaged in the spring. She was there for the worst 18 months of my life, and she did not run, did not flinch, did not offer excuses. She was just there, every time, in every way that mattered. I intend to spend my life with her, and I intend to be for her what she was for me. That is the standard. That is what I know now about what showing up actually means. I am 38 years old. I am in remission. I go to my monitoring appointments every 6 months and the scans stay clear, and Dr. Reyes is cautiously pleased. I have my health back, mostly. I have my savings, mostly, though a decade of family support and a medical year took bites out of it. I am still rebuilding. I have a job I am good at, a woman I love completely, and a clearer understanding of myself than I have ever had. I also have a family that I love with real and permanent limitations now built into that love. Limitations not from bitterness but from clarity. Clarity about who showed up and who didn't, about what the word family actually obligates each person to and what it does not, about the difference between being strong and being endlessly exploitable because you are afraid that setting a limit means you don't love people enough. I love my family enough. I also love myself enough now. That second one took longer to arrive. My mother still calls every Sunday. Last week she asked how I was feeling and I told her honestly. Good days and tired days and a scan coming up in 2 months that I am not exactly afraid of but that I feel every time I think about it. She listened. She said she wished she could be there for it. You can, I said. If you want to come, I'll come get you. She was quiet for a moment. Let me see about the arrangements, she said. I don't know if she'll come, but I meant it when I offered. That is the version of this relationship I am still willing to build. One where I show up for her and make genuine space for her to show up for me. One where the door is open but I am not the only one walking through it. The strong one. I have thought about that phrase a lot since Thanksgiving. About what it meant when my mother said it and what it has meant for the full decade before it. I think my mother meant it as the highest compliment she knew how to pay me. I think she looked at me, her son who had survived cancer, who had come through the hard months and emerged on the other side, and she felt genuine pride and relief and love. I believe all of that. What I also believe is that the phrase "the strong one" has functioned, in my family, as a permission structure. Permission to need me without wondering whether the needing was sustainable. Permission to call and ask and assume availability because that is what the strong one is. Available, capable, reliable, there. Being called the strong one sounds like praise. It is praise. It is also, quietly, a way of exempting yourself from the obligation of caring for someone. If he is strong, he doesn't need us to be strong for him. If he is capable, we don't have to worry about whether he is managing. If he always comes through, we don't have to consider what it costs him. The strong one label is most comfortable for the people who do not have to be strong. It frees them from reciprocity. It makes my needs invisible by design. I was never infinite. I was just willing to perform infiniteness for long enough that everyone around me started to believe it. I sat in a chemo chair 18 times and I was not infinite. I was a 36-year-old man who was frightened and exhausted and wanted his family in the room. I was completely ordinary in my fear and my need. I was no different from any other person facing the same thing. The only difference was that I had spent a decade cultivating a version of myself in my family's eyes that made my ordinary fear and ordinary needs seem incompatible with who I was supposed to be. That is what I am putting down. Not the love. Not the relationships, whatever they become going forward. Not even the willingness to help when help is genuinely needed and genuinely part of a reciprocal relationship. I am putting down the performance. the endless availability, the strong one who does not require anything back. I am willing to love my family. I am willing to help when I genuinely can, when the help is part of a real relationship and not the ongoing price of admission to one. I am willing to show up for the people who demonstrate, not with words but with presence, that they are willing to show up for me. I am not willing to be strong the way that word has always functioned in my family. The one who doesn't need. The one who is always there for everyone else's crisis while his own crises don't quite count because he can handle it. That version of strong is just another word for alone. I would rather be human, present and limited and loved by people who understand that I have needs and are sometimes willing to meet them. That is not too much to ask for. That has never been too much to ask for. I just spent 10 years not asking. I think I was afraid that if I asked, I would find out earlier what I found out in the chemo chair. That the answer was the empty seats and the group text and the reasons. Now I know. And knowing, as it turns out, is better than not knowing. Even when what you learn is harder than what you hoped. If you have ever been the strong one in your family, the one everyone calls, the one who always comes through, the one who holds everything together, and found yourself alone when you finally needed something in return, leave a comment below. You are not weak for needing. You are not wrong for eventually deciding that the arrangement has to change. If you believe that love has to move in more than one direction to actually be love, hit that like button and subscribe. Because being strong is not the same as being self-sufficient forever. And the people who give the most deserve, at minimum, to be shown up for once. #TheStrongOne